Back to the Not Like Us. I'm your host, Aaron, as always, and today I'm joined by Massimo. Massimo, can you pronounce your surname for me? That's the thing I meant to ask before we started. I knew there was something and I forgot to
No
ask.
problem. Yes, Massimo Rigatti, and
Regarding.
yes, thank you for having
Okay.
me. I'm an author, a speaker, and the creator of the Sober Method.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure having you on. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, about your kind of your journey and how you've kind of ended up where you are now?
Yeah, well, life's been a very interesting journey for me. I was born in the middle of the U.S. in Lincoln, Nebraska, and moved around a lot as a kid. Ended up after I graduated high school doing many different jobs in many different industries and worked as an entrepreneur across a total of 13 companies. And that was very, very interesting. A lot of success, a lot of failure, but also a lot of fun. And along the way, I became very much addicted to alcohol and drugs, and everything fell out from underneath me in 2015. I ended up on the street homeless with not really much, much to live for. I had the great luck to meet somebody randomly on a beach just before I lost everything. And her name was Samantha Thomas, and she really helped me realize that I had potential and that I should stand up sober. And I did. And then I went through AA and all the normal things, but it just wasn't enough. And I looked for something that was a little deeper, that was going to focus on improving myself for a lifetime. That's how I created the Sober Method. But it was just something that I just told people about. Samantha wanted me to write a book, but it was just an idea. And then tragically, on August 1st of 2020, she was killed by a drunk driver, which kind of brings the story full circle in a sense. And at that point, I sat down and I started writing the book, and it came out in 2023, and I've been doing this ever since.
Cool. I'm sorry about that loss as well. That must have been
Thank you.
awful, especially if it's somebody so key in your life, kind of influencing you to turn your life around, really.
Yeah, no, it definitely was difficult, but today I live with the positive knowing that her legacy lives on in the work that I do and the people that I help, and that's so powerful to me. And I know that wherever she is, she's definitely proud of the work I'm doing.
Yeah, it's good. Tell me about your method then, Massimo. What's kind of different about your method to kind of traditional ways of dealing with addiction and kind of trying to get sober and get away from any addiction that you may have?
So the sober method stands for stoic, observe, behavior, execute, and restore. And it works in a continuous improvement fashion. So unlike, kind of looking in the rearview mirror, this takes a holistic approach to improving yourself completely over time, a little step at a time. Starting with the stoicism, I wanted something that was grounded in non-religious background, because one of the challenges that I heard a lot when I would go to AA is that, oh, I just don't really want to go here anymore. I don't want to deal with the Christianity aspect of the experience. And you have to respect that. Not everybody is going to find their way into something that doesn't work for them in that fundamental aspect. So stoicism, been around for 2,500 years now. It's real easy to understand. It's about looking at yourself and reflecting upon, what the true meaning of your existence is. So the four cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Um, Everything in your life is based on those four things. I recommend that people start with Marcus Aurelius and just taking a passage from Meditations. Just take one verse and apply it in your life and look at how that applies to anything that you're doing improperly in your life. So you observe that impact in your life and how you might be able to change that. So, how does that then look in your overall behavior? Looking at that behavior, what are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? And then mapping something out that actually might work better for you. Then executing that revised behavior, testing it. How does it work in the real world? If I wanted to do something differently and it doesn't work, then I need to go back and reobserve, why didn't it work? remap that behavior, change, and re-execute until it does. Once it does, then you move into the restoration step, which is something somewhat akin to any of the 12-step programs that are out there, where you're looking to, how did this thing that you just corrected in your life, how did that impact others? How did you negatively impact the world with that behavior previously in your life? Reaching out to those that you impacted, seeking out that forgiveness, forgiving of yourself, and then you go back to step S and you repeat the process, looking at something new and different. And so over time, there's this improvement of mind, body, and soul that occurs just because you're going over and over through the process. Believe it or not, I'm in my 129th pass through my own system right now. And it is just fantastic because every single time I reach the end, I'm looking for stuff that is smaller and smaller and smaller in the overall perfection. I mean, I consider it smaller and smaller because, the first step through was like remain sober. Okay, how are you going to do that? But now it's I really hate when I cut people off in sentences that, those are the types of things that I'm working on now, as opposed to something so large in the past. And it's remarkable how much better I feel about myself as I improve those things, and then how much more confident I feel about myself when I meet new people.
Yeah, it sounds quite. The thing is, I'm a big believer in kind of continuous improvement from all other aspects of stuff, and I do think it's a powerful way to go because I think a lot of the problems that I've seen with kind of programs and stuff that's designed to help people kind of clear addiction, that there's always like an end point.
Mm-hmm.
So then, oh, you've done this, or you've done 6 weeks in rehab, and you've done this. Now off you go, and it's like puts you back to square one, doesn't it? Whereas you need to keep building on what you've done, really, rather than just going 6 weeks and I'm sorted, because that's not how it works. That's not how life works. How the body works. Definitely not how addiction works, right?
Right, right. You have to find and that's really kind of what occurred with me, is that I was going to AA, and after going for a while and being sober, and every week I would go, and all we would talk about was the past. And I was like, well, why are we not talking about how we're going to make it? I don't want to talk about my past. I don't even want to think about what I used to do. I want to think about what I could do. And that's really was the catalyst for this journey in the first place, was just realizing that uh, we shouldn't be sticking ourselves in the past in anything. If you look at anything that you improve upon yourself, even in your own health, you don't look back and say, "Oh, I remember when I used to do this." No, you're focused on how you're going to improve and get better, and that's what this really does.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to look at some of the things in the past to as a preventative measure, like to stop you getting, this is what led to me being here. So as part of my research for the show, I found out that 75% of people who have addictions experience some form of trauma in their life
Mhm.
previously. So it may be good to revisit that, have some counseling, but to dwell on it and to stay on it, I don't think that's helpful. I think you need to kind of process it the best you can, deal with it. You may never process it, but to a point where it can not drag you back in, and then keep moving forward. And then, like you say, it's important to look up and out rather than keep looking back.
Yeah, and the statistic you bring up is very true. In my own work, in my own consulting with clients, the thing that was very interesting to me to find out, even in my own experience, is that there's generally some childhood trauma that is the very it's like the very beginning. This is the epoch moment in your existence, but most people don't know what it is. I didn't understand or know what mine was. I had no idea. And mine was specifically related to an adoption that took place in my life, where my mother had remarried, and I didn't know who my father was. And and then my father didn't show up to at the adoption hearing, and I end up overhearing my mom said, "Well, nobody really wants him anyway." And I know the context of that and what was meant by this, but at the same time, it made me feel as a child overhearing the adults talking. That's why you should always be careful if the kids can hear you. Is that nobody wants me. And so that then drove me into a lifelong which still exists. It definitely still exists to prove that I am worthy of other people's time and attention. But I no longer felt like discarded. And that's what, once I discovered that, and I actually discovered this in rehab, I was able to remap my life out.
Yeah, I think, and it's surprising sometimes as well with children. Like you don't realize what can, because trauma is different for everyone, right? So you don't realize what it could be. They could, that conversation. Maybe like your mother didn't realize you'd heard it, or
Mhm.
did in her mind there was nothing because you probably didn't hear it. It was,
Yeah.
it was a private adult conversation sort of thing, and that, yeah, that could have had a lifelong effect on you. So
Mhm.
it's a difficult one, isn't it, to
Yeah.
kind of figure out, especially as a parent.
Yeah, no, it's something very challenging to navigate. And in working with others, I find that there are similar things that happen at some point in someone's life. Someone interacted with them in some fashion that changed their perception of themselves in a negative way, and then they use drugs and alcohol to help cope with whatever that impact was. And most people don't know what it is. The remarkable thing that I found in my own work, at least, is that once people know and you find that and you really dig and you find it, then you can attack it head on, as opposed to trying to cover it up, just like, I don't want to deal with it, I don't want to deal with it. Once you deal with it, it's much easier to then not look back and look forward to your improvement.
Yeah. But what's your view on people's kind of predisposition to addiction then? Because I would class myself as somebody who has an addictive personality, right? And I've had to manage that through my life. Um, I've been very fortunate, but I've kind of managed that through use of the gym and sport. I use that very much as an outlet. Even when I'm injured, I'll go just to, because that's an outlet. Um, Probably, and we talked a bit about social media off air, didn't we, beforehand? I think my phone, social media, that's definitely addictive. I didn't realize how addictive until, again, I did a bit of research for this show, and apparently it triggers all the same pathways as drug addiction, social media, like the dopamine and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And that was a Harvard study, so it's pretty legit.
Yeah.
But do you think people are kind of predisposed to that? So I use my phone a lot. I'm on social media a lot, and I go to the gym a lot. However, the way I look at that is I'm probably am addicted in some form. But the way I look at that is a more healthy one than I could be out drinking all the time, or I could be drinking at home all the time, or I could be doing drugs or any of those kind of things. So on one side, I'm looking at it thinking, I need to be better at this. And on the other side, I'm thinking, well, it could be worse. I could be doing things that are a bit more destructive.
Yes, I totally believe, and I think there's enough scientific study out there to prove that people are predisposed to addictiveness. There's alcoholism runs in one side of my family. Actually, about a quarter of my family it's been a challenge for generations. So that I think that they're that predisposed wiring in your head can definitely have an impact. Another interesting thing there that you bring up exercise, and then I'll touch on social media, is that ultra marathoners, nearly all of them are previous addicts. Yeah.
Mad, isn't it?
Like, I don't have an actual statistic, but I have yet to run into or talk to anyone that didn't use ultra marathoning as a means to stave off their addiction. In other words, they've gone from one addiction to another. But you know what? It's a healthy addiction. Good for them. I mean,
Yeah.
they
Well,
can run 100 miles and I can't.
it's healthy to a degree. I think. I think when he's taking it to that kind of extreme, maybe it starts to get unhealthy again because they push themselves so hard. But you're probably right. Anything that people take to like that kind of extreme level where they do so much and they kind of feel like they have to do it.
Yeah.
I think that is a form of addiction. And whether they've been an addict previously or not, I think it would, those type of people, it shows that they are kind of predisposed to that type of behavior and that they are probably more likely to go down that path than the average Joe, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I Completely agree with you. And I think that if you have an addictive personality or a propensity to be addictive to things, you can get addicted to literally anything. I mean, there are some times where I will find myself wanting to eat something over and over and over again. I'm like, wait a second. And I will stop myself and realize that, am I getting addicted to wanting to eat this food? And I challenge my own thinking on whether or not that's going on inside my head, just because I know that I have been an addict in the past. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't necessarily think about it. But it's just interesting.
Oh, you've just opened up a whole new thing now, because I am terrible with food as well, actually, and
Oh,
that is very much like an emotional reaction as well, an emotional thing, which is, yeah, and I'm terrible for it. I like sort of chocolate and sweet treats and stuff that every day, almost every day. I definitely got a problem.
so you're balancing that out then with the gym, because it certainly doesn't look like you have a sweet tooth.
Oh, I definitely do. I've got a problem. I do kind of balance it out, but to the point where, like last night, I didn't even eat dinner so I could have a sweet treat. That's how bad it is sometimes.
Well, sugar has the same exact response, dopamine wise, as cocaine, like literally identical if you map the two out in your brain. So, your reaction to sugar. So, it's easy to understand why people get addicted to sugar. Um, and, and eating is such a big challenge. I've worked with some emotional eaters to help them with their challenge, because we all eat, we all need to eat. So it's not like alcohol or drugs where you can say, well, you don't need this. No, you literally do need to eat. So then it becomes a challenge. And sugar's in everything. They put sugar in bread. I mean, I think to make it more addictive.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's kind of socially as well. It kind of gets built up, doesn't it? These kind of,
Yeah.
so like as a kid, off eat all your dinner, you can have a sweet treat. You can have
Mhm.
this, so then it becomes a reward as well. So then you're building that in your head already, even though the sugar enough is probably a reward enough. But then, socially it's been built up. Oh, it's a reward. It's a treat. It's this that. So when you feel bad, you think, oh, I'll just treat myself.
Yeah, no, that's true. I hadn't even thought about it from that angle. You're absolutely right. So we build up the social proof that it's okay because I've done well. I can have this, and so you've honestly just forgiven yourself for having the sweet treat.
Yeah, and yeah, honestly, going down a bad road here because we're opening up so many doors here, Massimo. Right?
No,
Um,
we definitely have.
because caffeine's another one. Honestly,
Hey,
coffee and caffeine drinks. I'm terrible for it.
I do enjoy coffee. I really do, but you know, I think that we could say that any vice is probably, it needs to be tamped down to just reasonable and prudent amount, right? Uh, we have to have healthy relationships with things, which is a great segue into talking about social media, because this is something that is challenging. There are so many people now that I have worked with that can't put down their phone, literally have a physical reaction to not having their phone in their hand or within their sight. They will, like, if they can't see it or can't hold it, they will physically start shaking like they're literally addicted to that device. That's scary. That something can possess that much power over you. And so this is one where I think it's finding that healthy balance and realizing that the phone, social media, they work for you. You don't work for it. And notifications, I think, play into that whole dopamine hit. And if you have notifications turned on, you're waiting for that next like, that next ding that goes off in your phone, and that's what you're waiting for. And if you remove those, the relationship. I don't use notifications on my phones at all, and it really helps my relationship with my device. So I have no notifications on likes or this, that. When it comes to my mind, I'm like, you know what? I should probably check my Instagram. Then I go check it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have like 300 things here. And then I manage it and I put it away because I'm like, and then maybe I think about it a couple days later. And that has really helped me manage that, because I used to be like unable to, it was the same way. It was a new addiction.
Yeah, I'm still terrible with it. So we spoke off air about kind of TikTok and YouTube, didn't we? And like with TikTok, like I say, I make these short form videos, really short form, 7 seconds, some of them, and some of them even less. And the problem with that is ultimately it's for that short term fixing it for people, so that the people are consuming to get that short term fix. But because I'm posting it for reach and to get views and to get people into my kind of TikTok stream, so then my hope is from there they discover my podcast and my YouTube and other stuff grows from there. But I'm checking it all the time to see how many views it's got. Is it successful? Is this one been good? Does it work? Why hasn't it worked? So I'm just constantly checking it and reading the comments and messing with it. So it's kind of added a layer now where I'm not only consuming, but I'm also checking all the time to see how my own stuff is doing.
Yeah. Well, what do you find where's the reward in that? I'm just curious. Um, as someone who's stepped away so much from that, I just literally, like on my TikTok, I will, in the morning, I will get up and I will look at it. I'll respond to any comments, and then I put it away and I don't look at it. And everything is scheduled to be posted, so I don't ever think about it. It's all done offline, and so I never actually interact with the apps. I mean, what is
Yeah.
what are you getting out of it? What is there a positive feeling you get from it?
Not really, no. I think at the minute it's because what I'm creating is I'm creating it specifically for the purpose of growing my social media channels, my TikTok, my Instagram, stuff like that. So I'm using it as a filter essentially, and that's the first step of the filter, to get people in to be aware of me and what I do, and then the next step is to push them on to the stuff that I actually enjoy doing and want to do long term, which is the podcasting, and part of that is my YouTube, because everything goes on there as well. So it's essentially a first step in the filter to get people in and aware of who I am and what I'm doing. And everything is done is kind of scripted, thought out, planned, recorded, edited. So there's a lot of work goes into the creative process. So I'm conscious to see what's working and what's not, so I don't waste my time keep repeating stuff that's not working, and I can kind of adjust, tweak stuff, and move on or try new stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's kind of part of the creative process at the minute that I need to keep checking, because if something really works, I'm going to double down on that essentially.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, you're creating like and I admit I haven't gone to your TikTok yet. You're creating like a 8-second movie every day, and you need to know whether or not we need to make version 24 of this movie or just throw this one away and go to a new franchise. Is basically what you're doing.
Yeah, so I have a series on there that I'm running at the minute, which is I find ridiculous things that people say in podcasts, and like like these overly ridiculous people that say you can make millions doing X, Y, Z, and like they each just top themselves up. Oh, I get up at 2:45 in the morning and stuff like that. And me and my friend just pretend to be the crew recording it, and then we just cut the feed, we just cut them off, and then we just leave. But that's worked really well, and that's a lot of views and a lot of reactions and responses. So we've kind of doubled down on that, and I've done a lot more of those. But I'm still filtering in and trying other stuff as well to try and figure out if I can find something else that also works really well.
Yeah, no, you saying that immediately reminded me of the old Monty Python skit, which I'm sure you've seen, where they're like, I got up half an hour before I went to bed, went downhill, they're like all trying to outdo each other on how great they are. And that's exactly what those guys are like. No, I made 15 million. I did it in 8 minutes. And
yeah, I mean, there's so many ridiculous things out there. And claims, and I don't know why people do it. I mean, it's so daft and extreme, and there's no need for it. You can just go on a podcast and have a conversation. It's okay.
It's so true, so true.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that stuff. But it's definitely added a layer to my addiction, I suppose. But then I suppose it's probably also changed the way I consume content now. So I used to consume content a lot, just kind of mind-numbingly, not even thinking about it, just consume it. If it's funny, I'd kind of share it with some friends, or I'd just move on. but now I look at content with a different kind of lens, thinking, can I do something similar to that? Can I tweak that, change that? Or, so some of the stuff gives me ideas that I can kind of play around with.
Right, exactly. So it's almost like it's research, it's part of what I'm doing, and then growing, and then ultimately you're using that as a funnel into everything else you're doing. So it's a tool. So I mean, and you're walking a fine line. Then you've turned something that you enjoyed doing in a passive sense, and you're now utilizing it in an active sense in order to achieve something positive in your life. So I don't know. I think we're kind of probably splitting hairs. As long as you're aware of the fact that it could tip over into a total addiction, I think you're okay.
Yeah, at least that's the excuse I'm using right now anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we're both using that excuse. See how I totally framed it up and that you're not doing anything wrong?
Yeah. But and like we said, we talked about YouTube, right? And
Yeah.
I think part of society as a whole now, and because we kind of fed these kind of the whole sugar narrative, the whole social media, the way that the short, quick fixes of kind of dopamine all the time, and just get a hit whatever you want. Whereas we spoke about the difficulty of creating longer form content, YouTube, podcasts, and stuff, and getting people's attention for a longer period of time is much more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, at the same time, though, some of the long form content is some of the most popular out there, and it really comes down to threading a really engaging guest with the good questions, and allowing. I think in the long form content, it's allowing that expansion to happen. I mean, just look at the popularity of those like Lex Friedman, and there's somebody who's doing 3 hour long podcasts, and they're some of the most viewed on YouTube. So I mean, it is possible.
Interestingly, right, I've done most of my podcasts run for an hour. I do hour shows. I did one for 3 hours, and it's had by far the most views and listens than any other show, which is mind blowing to me. And I just wish that I and the guests always had 3 hours that we could just sit and spin yarns for 3 hours. But I don't know. I don't know why or how that is the case, but it is the case, and it's evident in my analytics, because that 3 hour show is head and shoulders above anything else I've done, as in engagement wise and watch wise. However, I don't think there's anything exceptional about that show that's different to any of the other stuff that I do, other than the time, really.
That's very interesting, but it's also really cool that it's fleshed out in your own analytics from your own subscriber base and those that didn't subscribe but watched it. So that's really remarkable, and it says something, but I'm not sure what it says, because the long form podcast is definitely on the rise. I mean, that's everything that I've read says this is what you should be doing. I don't have a podcast, but and I find that interesting. I do listen to quite a few long form podcasts though, so I think that it is I learn a lot more and then I have deeper respect for both the host and the guest, because they spent the time to dig into all sorts of interesting topics that also make you think. And I think in the shorter form, you never really get there. You're kind of like somewhat invested in it. And there's a tipping point in a podcast, I think, at about the 45 minute mark, where you're like, I'm going to keep listening to this because it's interesting to me, or I'm just going to not listen to the other hour and a half. And that's just me personally. I don't know if others are like that, but I'm like, ooh, this could go places, and then I'll listen to the rest of it.
Yeah, I think people kind of, so the guest and host as well generally kind of settle into it a little bit more as well. They kind of get a rhythm with each other, kind of figure out, I suppose they come a bit more acquainted with each other, a bit more confident, go a bit deeper on stuff potentially. Because like all the stuff I listen to is long form, like the Joe Rogan stuff, Chris Williamson's podcast. A lot of it is, I'd say, 2 hours plus at least.
Yeah. Both good podcasts too, by the way.
Yeah, I find them quite interesting because they're so diverse, and that's kind of what I do on mine. Not obviously nowhere near at the same level, but I'm trying. I'm interested in lots of different things, so I'd like to have different people on, ask about different things, and learn about different things as I go. And it's as much for me as it is for anybody else, to be honest. It's a bit of a selfish thing where I'm meeting new people, learning new things, and kind of developing myself.
Yeah, no, and I think, me on the other side of this, I don't have the time to invest in doing a podcast, but I really enjoy them for the opposite reason. I enjoy getting on as many diverse podcasts as possible because I like understanding different perspectives of my hosts because they all come from different backgrounds. So I selfishly like being on podcasts to learn more about about others. So I think that's very true of almost every podcast that's out there is that there's some question or some journey that the host is on that they're trying to search for answers for, which is really cool because then you get invested in their search.
Yeah, and I think it helps, doesn't it? So, like all these podcasts that I've named, they are, I find them good because the host is genuinely interested and curious and trying to, you know, to learn about whatever the topic is or whatever that person's all about. So, I think that really makes it better because I've been on some podcasts as a guest myself, and I found them quite challenging. Some of them have been great. Don't get me wrong. Some of them we've had free flowing, great conversations, but some of them have had a list of questions, and no matter what's happened, they have rigorously stuck to their questions. And it's like you could say anything, and the next questions come in no matter what. They're not going to dig into anything. There's no conversation around it. It's you're having these 10 questions, and that's it.
I've been on some of those before as well. They are a little bit painful. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably did the same thing I did, which is I try to steer away from the questions. Like if we can get to something deep enough here, maybe they won't go back to the next question. I know they want to ask me.
Yeah, I just find them so soulless. They're just so difficult.
I'm sure that the audience probably it does as well because then it just becomes methodical. There's no rapport between the two that you're listening to. It's just
Yeah, it's all a bit kind of AI style. I don't know.
yeah, exactly. That's the last thing we can you imagine if we start having like an AI doing interviews?
I tell you what, we can't be far away from it. Before long we'll have an AI podcast, won't we, with AI host and hopefully not AI guests as well, because that'll really ruin it.
Yeah, that would really ruin it. Well, you'd have to have different personalities for the AIs.
Yeah, you might get away with it with a host if they can kind of if they can make them conversational. You might get away with it, but not with a guest.
Yeah, no, I was just earlier on a brief live about AI before we went live here, and we were talking about this very thing. When are we going to get to conversational AI? And I said, well, I think it's closer than we think. I bet it's this year. I bet by the end of this year we have some level of conversational AI. And what is that going to be like? It is going to be quite interesting to see how everyone handles that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to navigate. I think it's going to be. I think the problem is when the video becomes so good and it's getting there now, where you can't tell the difference between AI and real. I think that's going to be a problem.
Oh, I agree. Completely agree. Yeah. There are all sorts of ethical challenges wrapped up in that one too, all right?
Yeah, you got the ethical challenges, and you got I don't know. There'll be so many issues. I think just kind of trust will be a problem, won't it? With any kind of online source, are you going to have the trust that A, they're real, and B, what's the purpose behind it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, for all you know, I could be an AI doing this interview right now. Wouldn't that be weird?
I'd
I
be
mean,
really impressed if you were.
but I mean, like that's theoretically something that could happen in the future. And then, yeah, I think trust is probably going to be the biggest challenge going forward. Really, you already can do it in audio. You can load very little amount of your own speaking and have it replicated enough to convince any loved one that that's me that called you on the phone. I mean, that's been occurring. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, I've done it. I've done that. Used my audio, uploaded my voice, and used my audio for an intro on this podcast at the beginning,
Mm.
to do the introduction. The only difference was it actually cleaned up my accent a little bit and made it made me sound a bit clearer and better. But apart from that, it was really, really good, to be fair.
Huh.
And it's scary how good it is.
That is. But then it took the character out of you because you lost some of your accent.
Yeah, well, I ditched it in the end as well because I did feel that it's just a bit impersonal, and I just wanted it to be a bit more natural and a bit more me. So I changed it after a while, but I did it at the start, and it was a useful tool at the start because it kind of saved me having to record an intro every time, and I could just pop the text over into that, and it would do it for me. But
Sure, sure. But there's
yeah, but
something
go,
about the overall like resilience in working in this frame though that is the big challenge that I look at it in my own personal challenge with addiction is the same type of resilience to remain sober exists in the same challenge that we face in continuing to be on these platforms and continuing to work our, do what we're doing. We're out here in the salt mine trying to be relevant is how I feel sometimes. I don't know. Maybe I'm alone.
no, that's a great way to look at it actually, because you can be out here, and you said about that video of mine that you watched on YouTube, right? So I've got 466 subscribers or something, and I'm putting out content, and almost being stonewalled and nothing coming back, and yeah, that can be difficult sometimes. I think you're doing all this work for something that isn't necessarily having the payoff that you want it to have, and I think you're doing it off faith because ultimately you don't know if it'll ever have a payoff, really. So, and I suppose I can see the how that would be very similar to addiction, especially you're trying to give up an addiction, suffering all this pain trying to achieve it. Because let's be honest, it'd just be easier to stay on the path. There's a reason you're addicted to something is because it kind of numbs the feeling at very least, if not give you a good feeling for a short while. Um, so it's very similar that you got to keep plugging away and believe that down the road at the end of the line it's going to be worth all the effort, all the pain, all the struggle.
Yeah. No. You totally tied the two together, and that's what I was trying to say is that when I first started out and when most people start out, why am I doing this? And that's why there's so much relapse because you can't get over that hump. You can't see that there is success. It is worth confronting your pain and worth moving on. And the life that is really worth living is actually a couple years after you're sober and and convincing yourself that it's worth that investment. That's tough. It is. And I understand why it so many people struggle to get over that hump and to stay and remain sober for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, especially with life, because life isn't smooth, right? So you're going to have downs. You're trying to come out of addiction or whatever, and you're still going to get downs and things that go wrong and things that go bad, and they're the moments that can make or break you, right?
Oh, absolutely. In my own personal story, when Samantha was murdered, it was one of these things where everybody thought I was going to relapse. I'd been sober for over 4 years at that point, and the second that occurred, it was all hands on deck. Watch Massimo, make sure he doesn't try to take a drink, doesn't try to do anything that he's not going to harm himself. He's not, But the interesting thing is, I didn't have any of those feelings that so many projected upon me. And in retrospect, I'm not exactly sure why I didn't. The only thing that I can say is that in that moment in learning it, it was obviously it was crushing and it it just ripped my heart out of my chest. But something clicked very quickly, I think, within me that said, well, I have to remain sober. I mean, that's what she would have wanted. And then that sustained me long enough to get through the pain to then be able to not think about that anymore and to move forward. Um, so having something thrown at you is always going to happen. It's just under, you've got to find something that grounds you and that keeps you on path.
Yeah. How did you find kind of not just in that moment? So it obviously in the years leading up to that. How did you find resilience in the moments that were really difficult? I suppose the ones that were kind of pulling you back in. How did you kind of find resilience to keep going when there might there must have been occasions where you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, there were several of those. I My time on the street when I'd had a pretty charmed life is how I would think of my existence before I ended up homeless. And my resilience really came from thinking about the nights that I nearly froze to death when I was shivering and it was 10 degrees um and just reminding myself that I didn't want to go back to that place and that even though this wasn't great and what just happened was horrible, this was still better than that. And I referenced that point. And any time that I would struggle, I would always think back to like what was the worst point in my life. That could be this. If you take a drink, you're going to be there. And so that's how I really pushed myself through when I did struggle. And I don't feel like I really struggle now, thankfully. I think the more time you put behind you, the easier that is. At the same time, though, I know that I'm literally one drink away from being an addict again because it would be off to the races. I know it would. And I'm honest with myself about that. And I think that also helps.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that level of honesty and understanding of where you're at and what could happen essentially. And like you say, once you've kind of put some put some road down between you and your last drink or your last whatever it may be, if you're addicted to something else, and I think it probably gives you a bit more belief that you can keep going. I've done a day, I can do another day. I've done
Hmm.
2 days, I can do 4 days, and then it kind of grows and grows and grows potentially. Um, Not that I've been through that, and I don't want to minimize it at all in any way. So tell me if I'm wrong, but I just
No.
feel like if once you've achieved stuff, I've done a week, or I've got through Christmas without a drink. It gives you. It's like anything. It's like business. If you have a bit of success in business, you get some sales or whatever. You think I can do it, I can sell, and you have that confidence build, and it doesn't mean that you can't fall off. It just means that you have the confidence in yourself that you can keep doing it and keep going.
Yeah. No, it truly is just that. And you begin to look at I had this way when I was at the peak of my addiction. I was running a business. I mean, I was a business owner. So just imagine that your boss was the guy that would walk into the office in the morning with a handle of Jack Daniels and put it under his desk, and like even when you were meeting with him, he might just pull that bottle out from under his desk and take a pull off the bottle and then put it back under his desk in the middle of a meeting. That was me. Uh, so it was not, I did not have a healthy relationship with alcohol at all, nor did I hide it at all as things got as I got more and more addicted and closer to the end when I ultimately lost everything. Um, and now I don't exactly remember where I was going with that, but but I think that in doing that, um, I lost my train of thought. You can either put me back on my tracks or
That's all right. But we were talking about kind of the confidence that you build by
oh
by
yes,
achieving stuff and by kind of
yes, yes,
building
yes.
momentum almost.
Yes. Okay. So the what I was going to talk about was the fact that things were so bad. My life was bad. That's why I was drinking so much. I just nothing was going right, and so I started saying, "Well, don't worry about it. Tomorrow's Friday." And invariably, somebody is saying, "Boss, it's only Tuesday." I'm like, well, it's half over, and then tomorrow everyone will talk about how it's Hump Day. Thursday, you're already telling me about your weekend plan. So, see, tomorrow's Friday. You know, and and I would convince myself of this in such a fashion that I was able to push myself through the week, even when things were absolutely horrible. And then once I became sober, I began to take that same philosophy in the very beginning. Except I applied it to sobriety. Well, you already made it to Tuesday without a drink. I mean, like tomorrow's, hump day, and then then it's like almost the weekend. And so, tomorrow's Friday. I've already made it through the week without drinking. And so I use that same philosophy to like put a kind of an accelerator on where I was at until the days and the weeks just started adding up faster and faster. And as you get older, time flies. I mean, I can't believe that it's the middle of February already. I mean, it's just life goes by very quickly.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like a perspective thing, isn't it? Because when you're young, time seems to take forever, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
that's because it's a larger portion of your life, right? Whereas now, like every year that goes on, a year is a smaller portion of your life, so it kind of seems like it's going quicker, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe that is why that happens. I've never really thought about it, but that's probably the most plausible explanation I've ever heard for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just making that up. I might be full of it here, but it just kind of seems the way to me. It seems to be why that might be the case.
Yeah, no, and well, there's also if you think about everything that you learn is also compressed in those early years of your life. You're like drinking from a fire hose when you're younger, and as you get older, you learn, but at not necessarily at a slower pace, but there is less that maybe you are taking in. And so maybe that's also why it seems that way. I'm not sure, but it's very interesting how time dilation happens in one's life because I'm going to be 50 this year. And it's like one of these things where I'm like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it does creep up on you, doesn't it? And mentally, I'm still 12, so it's a it's a tough gig.
I suffer from that. I feel like I'm in my early 20s, and I think in my case, a lot of that has to do with the fact that I went through an iteration of my life from the time I was an adult until I was, 40 years old, in which I basically drank and partied all the time. And then I have this second chapter of my life where I feel like I'm beginning again because I went all the way to homeless and I lost everything. So then you're in a rebuild. It's like becoming 18 again, except you're 40. And now you're like living that life again and rebuilding and reacquiring and doing all those things. And so I think that's part of the reason that I feel that way. I feel like things are possible. Um, and I find that many people my age are in a retraction, so to speak. They're like they're coming into a protective point of their life, protecting their assets, like I don't want to do that. I could get hurt. I'm like, what? I don't, those things don't ever cross my mind. I'm like, why not jump off this bridge? It looks like it's fun. Like I don't know where that mindset comes from other than the fact that um, I still am wanting to learn more and know more. And I think um, that kind of mindset keeps you younger.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I'm always trying to kind of develop and get better in different areas and different things. And I think I think when we lose that, we kind of stagnate, don't we? And we just kind
Yeah.
of I find it quite depressing. If I'm not moving forward, then what am I doing?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like what could I learn from, I'll meet a new person and I'm always like, what could I learn from this person? What do they do? What experiences they had that I haven't had? And I'll dig into that. It's just so interesting to me. Everybody has a story, and so few people ever get an opportunity to really tell it. Because everybody that's around them, like, oh yeah, he does this, he does that, and they're not really invested in it. But boy, they would literally kill to have anyone listen to what they do. One of the fun things that I do an awful lot is I'll ask people if I can tour their workplace, and they light up like a Christmas tree. They're like, "What? You want to come see what I do?" Because nothing makes anybody more excited than like being able to tell someone that doesn't know anything about what they do, because their spouse, they've run out of, they're like, I just wish I could turn him off when he comes home so I didn't have to listen to this every day, right? So they're very happy to take you on a tour. But I've toured all sorts of manufacturing plants and farming operations and just everything under the sun to learn how they work and how they function, just from that simple question. And it's so profoundly interesting.
Yeah, it's just about being curious, right? Like having keeping that curiosity, because that's what children have a lot of as well, isn't it? It's that curiosity. They want to learn. They're interested in stuff, and I think as we get older, not everybody, but there's a danger that we lose that curiosity and that kind of stagnates us a little bit and keeps us, keeps us in that little phase of life that we've kind of already got to.
Yeah, yeah. But for me, that sounds so boring, and I think that you're with me on that one.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't deal with it. Mind you, I wouldn't say it's weird because I wouldn't say I'm an exciting person. I don't go and I'm not doing anything wild, but I generally kind of I'm curious about stuff and I always want to learn. I used to annoy people because somebody would tell me something that I'd never heard before, and I'd Google it because I want to learn more about it. Then, or if something comes on the TV, I Google it and like because I just that's how my mind works. I want to learn more about it, even if it's a film, a particular
Hmm.
actor, wherever it is. And that's kind of how I've operated. But when people tell you stuff and then you Google it, they're like, "What? You don't believe me?" I was like, well, "Yeah, I just want to learn a bit more. I just want to get a bit more in depth on it."
I wanna dive deeper so I can ask you more intelligent questions. That's what I generally say because I do the same exact thing, and people are like, "Why are you pulling that your phone out to search what I'm telling you right now?" I'm like, "Well, because I want to know more about, and I don't want to act like an idiot when I ask you the next question."
Yeah, I do it a lot. But people must think I'm rude, but it's it's generally from a place of curiosity, and I think, oh, yeah, some a question will come into my mind, and I think, oh, I'll look this up or I'll look that up, and then just end up going down some sort of rabbit hole and learning stuff that I have no business learning, really. But
Yeah, I mean, ultimately though, we're probably both the best at any sort of trivia game because we're just prone to doing that.
yeah, I'm terrible for it. Um, yeah, what can you do? Massimo, your book, where can people find it?
You can find it at Amazon or anywhere books are sold. It's available. Actually, there's two books. My first book is Flavors of Confidence, Reflection of Those in Need. That is my self memoir, and it gives you a kind of background on me and how I came to the Flavor of Confidence method, which was originally was a 10-step program. But then over time, I just reworked that into what became the Sober Method. And that's the second book, Flavors of Confidence, Sober Method. And yeah, so that's just the method. I made that into like a pocket size so you can take it anywhere you need to be as a reference material and reference guide.
Yeah, I like that. I like the loop of your new method of the sober method because like we discussed earlier, it's about being able to continue on that
Mhm.
path. It's a never ending journey, right? It's not
Yeah.
something we can just kind of tick the box, we're done now and move on. We kind of got to always manage that, same as anything in our lives, really. Anything that we want to
Mhm.
do or achieve, we got if we're not actively, sometimes not always consciously, but if we're not, when we need to, dipping in and actively kind of resetting and pushing ourselves in the right direction, then we can easily slip off the path.
Yeah, no, it's those check-in points, and one of the practicalities in this is in your execute step is the journaling that happens on a regular basis. You can look back and see how much you've advanced and what's going on, and and so you can see that ladder and how far you've climbed from your past self. And I think people often find it remarkable how much you can change yourself if you truly want to.
Yeah, that's something I've never really done a lot of, journaling, but a lot of people say it's really effective, for lots of different stuff, not necessarily just addiction, but just
Mhm.
to kind of see that progress through life. So you can look back and you can see that actually when you're feeling like you're kind of down and out a little bit, you can go, actually, I was all the way down here, and now I've achieved all of this,
Yeah.
and you can have some sort of pride and confidence in the fact that actually you keep going, you are moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that is very helpful, and I'll admit that's one point where I'm not the best at. I recommend it a lot. I'm not the best journaler, but I definitely do long journaling at least once a month, where I'll put down 5, 10 pages worth of everything that transpired in the preceding weeks and where things are at, and then what these are the most interesting points of my journaling, and I find that people often forget to do this. Where do you want to go? What are your hopes and dreams at this moment in time? Those are some of the most interesting things for me to go back in time and read. Like, what? I was thinking about doing that. why, what, why? And then you're like, why did I stop wanting to do that? And then you start pondering your own, how did I get to this point, and why did I change my thinking? And it, I think it really helps you reinvestigate yourself when you look back at some of those past entries.
Yeah, I was just thinking actually as well when we are talking about this is podcasting is quite similar, right? So you could do a lot of podcasts, and if you do that for over a period of time, you could go back and look at your first podcasts or your first few and see, how you've kind of developed in the way that you think about stuff, and I've definitely found that from mine. I mean, I'm still nowhere near where I want to be, but from the start, I've come a long way actually. I'd be in a room with no lights and a cheap microphone that sounded like I was talking into a tin can, and just my webcam and stuff. There's lots of stuff that's developed and got better over time. And if I look back, I can see that, even
Yeah.
though now I'm still like, I need to get better. Everything needs to be better.
Ah, well, I mean, that's the great thing about tomorrow is that you have the opportunity to make one small thing better, and you know it's looking at those small measurable steps and then holding yourself accountable to them that will make any ordinary person extraordinary. It really is, but it requires that dedication, that time, that effort. It's like wearing down a stone in a river. It's just you just a little at a time. It's a jagged edge, and if you look at the river like, oh, that rock's always going to be there. You come back 5 years and it's nice and smooth, or more like 100 years. But you get my point. It's that you can improve yourself if you just take those small steps.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That kind of 1% improvement in it. That small, and I think that's what I've been guilty of in the past as well, especially is I'm a very impatient person. So I want everything to happen right now. I want everything to be fixed and sorted instantly. And if it's not, that's not good enough. But I do temper myself and I do kind of work on that. And I am trying to make small improvements. And I have done over time. And I'm still doing it because it's surprising actually what you can achieve over time.
Hmm.
But in a day, you probably can't achieve what you want to achieve, but over like a year, 2 years, you look back, you'll be really shocked at what you've done if you just make these minor small changes and just be consistent with it. I think consistency is important, right?
Yeah, no, it's that consistency. You nailed it, and I couldn't be any more impatient than you are. I'm equally impatient, and I want to see results like instantaneously. Those who know me well, and there are a couple of them, they keep me in check, and I'm sure you have people in your life that do the same, saying, Massimo, look, it's only been a week. you know, you said when you started doing this it was going to take a year, and you're frustrated. So, I mean, but that's just the nature of who I am. I'm very impatient. I want to see results now. I put in this much effort. How come I haven't, if it's a year, why haven't I seen 1/50th of my journey complete? And if I can't see it or understand how I achieve that, then I'm just so frustrated with myself. Like, what can I do more in order to get that here sooner? But there's absolutely nothing I can do, and I get reminded by these same people, just keep being consistent. That's how you've won every battle behind you. And they're right, but I don't like hearing it.
Same. I don't. I know it's a must. It is. It's very, very necessary to be consistent and to stay the course. But I just want it all now,
Yep.
and I'll never change the way that I think. But I'm just kind of managing it and being trying to be realistic the best I can.
Absolutely, that's what we have to be, and I think that's the thing that everybody's impatient. I think that that's like baked into what we have become like in Western society is that we have impatience. We want everything now. We want to take a pill rather than go to the gym. We want to, like rather than face ourselves, we'd rather take a drink. I mean, like addiction is the same type of situation here. So we really have to give ourselves some grace and realize that time invested over long periods will achieve what we want, and if we're willing to accept that of ourselves, then we'll achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. Couldn't agree with more. I don't like it, but I agree with it. It is correct.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Massimo, where can people find out a bit more about you then? So obviously they can get your book on Amazon and stuff, but where can they find you on social media if they want to kind of find some of your content?
You bet. So, any social media platform, you can follow me at Sober Method, also sobermethod.com, or my own website, massimorigati.com. I'm sure you'll put that in show notes so people can find it if they need it. But yeah, Sober Method, real easy to remember.
Nice and simple. I like that. Not complicated like mine. I think mine's different on almost every platform, so I just keep people guessing. It's probably not very helpful, but there we are.
Well, you know what? I got really lucky in a sense, in because when I decided I was going to rebrand Flavors of Confidence method into the Sober Method, because I wanted something that was easier for people to remember the steps and to achieve the same outcome. And I arrive at the Sober Method. I'm like, well, it's 2023. There's no way that this doesn't already exist. I mean, why wouldn't it? You would want the Sober Method to get sober, right? And then when I go out and I search and like it doesn't exist, I swooped all the domains, all the social handles, everything up right away. So before I even wrote the first sentence of the book.
Smart.
Yeah.
I like that. Massimo, honestly, it's been brilliant having you on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Before we do go, do you have any kind of final thoughts or messages that you want to leave people with?
Absolutely. I think I just want to tie it back up with what we were talking about just a moment ago, is that stop and take a moment and look at yourself and look at your life and what you want to improve in it, and know that anything that you want to achieve is just take those small measurable steps to get to that next step in your life, and you'll make yourself extraordinary. It's all within you. You have the power to change you, and no one else does. They can have an outside impact on you, but at the end of the day, the power to achieve greatness is right here, and make it happen.
Amazing. Couldn't agree more with that. Massimo, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Take care of yourself. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.